She trusts me with everything. That is exactly why this works.
And she has no idea?
None. She never will.
Wrong. She knows everything.
She heard it the way you hear a car accident. Not all at once. First the laugh, low, familiar, intimate in a way that had no business being intimate inside a bridal salon at 2 in the afternoon. Then the voice underneath it, velvet soft, absolutely certain of itself. And then the name. She sent me her schedule this morning, color-coded, cross-referenced. My beautiful, meticulous control freak. Alessia Caruso stood on the raised fitting platform of Maison Lawrence's private bridal suite, surrounded by 7 floor-to-ceiling mirrors that reflected her gown from every angle, and felt the floor open beneath her feet. Not literally. The pale gold hardwood was exactly where it had always been. But something inside her chest cracked open, sharp and instant, the way ice does when something heavy walks across it without permission. She did not move. She did not breathe. She stood in $300,000 worth of ivory silk and French lace, while the voice of the man she was going to marry in 72 hours drifted through the ornate dressing screen beside her, speaking to someone else. About her. As if she were furniture he had grown tired of rearranging. That was the first second. By the 10th, she already knew her entire life had just detonated. By the 30th, she had decided what she was going to do about it. 48 hours earlier, Alessia Caruso had been exactly what Manhattan expected her to be. She was 34. She had built Caruso Interiors from a borrowed studio in Brooklyn and a bone-deep stubbornness into a design firm whose name appeared on the shortlist of every publication that mattered. She had a reputation so clean it practically gleamed in the dark. She had the kind of elegance that made people lean slightly forward when she entered a room, instinctively wanting to be closer to whatever warmth she carried. And she had Raffaele Conti. Raffaele, 43, dark-eyed, sharp-jawed, the kind of handsome that felt vaguely threatening even when he smiled. He had built Conti developments across New York, Chicago, and Miami through a combination of intelligence so precise it felt surgical and charm so calibrated it should have come with a warning label. He walked into rooms, and people unconsciously straightened their spines. He spoke quietly because he never needed volume to be obeyed. There had been rumors, naturally. There are always rumors about men like Raffaele Conti. Whispers about his family's origins in Palermo. About the Conti name stretching back 3 generations into things that didn't file tax returns. About business partners who materialized after midnight and vanished before dawn. Alessia had chosen the man she knew over the shadows people projected onto him. She had spent 5 years being his partner, his social architect, his bridge between old money and new legitimacy. She had introduced him to the right investors, the right politicians, the right charity boards. She had helped transform Raffaele Conti from a name that made certain circles uncomfortable into a name that made certain circles competitive for his attention. She had done it because she loved him. She had done it because she believed, with every fiber of her careful, meticulous heart, that he was becoming something real. In 72 hours, they were supposed to make it permanent. 500 guests. St. Augustine's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue. An 8-piece orchestra. Flowers shipped from Ecuador and Provence. A reception at the Pierre that would be written about for years. Alessia had planned every detail herself, because that was what she did. She made beautiful things out of chaos. She believed that if you controlled enough variables, love became something you could build and keep forever. She had not planned for the conversation happening 4 feet away on the other side of a decorative silk screen. "You're glowing." Raphael's voice, low and layered with a tenderness that had always undone her. "I cannot stop looking at you." Raphael, a woman's voice, younger, familiar in a way that sent ice water flooding through Alessia's veins. "Someone could see us. What if she—" "Alessia won't be here for hours," Raphael said, and Alessia could hear the smile in it. Easy, unbothered. "She's at the florist reviewing centerpiece arrangements. She sent me her schedule this morning, color-coded, cross-referenced. My beautiful, meticulous control freak." The woman laughed. It was a laugh Alessia had heard 1,000 times before, in the office during late nights, over takeout containers and mood boards and deadline panic. Bright and quick and genuine.
Fiamma Russo.
26 years old. NYU graduate. Senior associate at Caruso Interiors. The girl Alessia had personally recruited 2 years ago, mentored with her whole heart, and trusted without reservation. Alessia's hand moved to her throat. Her fingers found the strand of South Sea pearls Raffaele had clasped around her neck last Christmas, murmuring Bellissima against her hair while she laughed and told him it was too much. She pressed them now like they were the only solid thing left. "I love when you call her that," Fiamma said, and there was something new in her voice now. Something that hadn't been there before, a small, cruel edge, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "It's so perfectly condescending. Does she know that you find her exhausting?" "Alessia is many things," Raffaele replied. "Brilliant. Strategic. Exactly what I needed to become exactly who I needed to be. But exhausting. Cara, you have no idea." The room tilted. Alessia's hand shot out and gripped the back of the nearby settee, the ivory silk of her gloves pulling tight across her knuckles. She was aware, distantly, as if watching herself from the ceiling, that she was crushing $3,000 of hand-stitched French lace. She did not let go. "3 more days, Fiamma whispered. "I don't know if I can stand it. Watching you marry her. Watching everyone celebrate while you're carrying my child," Raffaele finished. His voice dropped.
Quiet. Sincere.
The voice he used when he meant something. "While you're giving me something she never could. Something real." The settee was the only thing keeping Alessia vertical. Pregnant. Fiamma Russo was pregnant with Raffaele Conti's child. "I wanted to tell her so many times," Fiamma said. "Did you see her face yesterday when she was going over the seating chart? So focused. She kept asking me to confirm which of your business associates needed to be near the family section." "She's exceptional at details," Raffaele said. "That's what makes her valuable. She believes if she manages every variable, controls every outcome, the world will behave. It's endearing in a tedious way." "Do you love her at all?" The pause that followed lasted 4 full seconds. Alessia counted them. Each one landed somewhere behind her sternum, like a closed fist. "I respect her," Raffaele finally said. "She has been exactly what I needed. The perfect polished surface to hide what's underneath." Alessia Caruso, the brilliant design executive with the impeccable reputation and the society connections. She made me legitimate. She opened doors that would have stayed closed to a Connie for another decade. Turned me from a threat into a trophy. "That's not an answer." "It is the only answer that matters," Raffaele replied. "Love is for people who have the luxury of choosing based on feelings. I chose based on strategy. And in 3 days, that strategy becomes permanent. I will have everything I need, the legitimate empire, the social standing, the political access. And I will have you, both of you." Alessia Caruso stood in her wedding gown in the afternoon light and felt 5 years of her life reduce themselves to rubble. Then she reached into her beaded clutch, pulled out her phone with steady hands, opened the voice recording app, and pressed record. "What happens after the wedding?" Fiamma asked. "Nothing changes," Raffaele said smoothly. "Alessia will be my wife. Beautiful, accomplished, perfect for photographs and charity galas. You will be mine in the ways that actually matter. Discreet, protected, cherished. She'll find out eventually. She's too smart not to." Raffaele laughed. The same warm laugh he had given Alessia 1,000 times across 1,000 dinner tables. Alessia sees exactly what she chooses to see. She spent years convincing herself that I am a reformed man who just needed the love of a good woman to become respectable. She believes her own story. Why would she question it now? "Because I'm pregnant," Fiamma said flatly. "That is not exactly subtle. By the time anyone notices, we will be married. You will be taken care of. The apartment in Cobble Hill I purchased through the Development LLC, the trust fund I am establishing for the baby, everything will be clean and compartmentalized." Alessia's thumb moved across the screen to verify the recording was still active.
It was.
She listened to Raffaele instruct Fiamma about the prenuptial agreement Alessia had signed, how his lawyers had written it, how it was weighted in his favor by design, how Alessia's own attorney had warned her against signing and Alessia had overruled her out of love and trust. She listened to him describe her company, her 12 years of work, her reputation, her network, as assets that become mine through marriage. She held the phone steady and did not make a sound. When the voices finally moved toward the door of the adjacent suite and faded, Alessia pressed stop. She verified the recording had saved. She checked the timestamp. 19 minutes and 47 seconds of her fiancé dismantling every beautiful thing she had ever believed about them. Then she opened her messages and sent 3 texts. First, to Valentina Greco, her attorney. Emergency. Tonight. I need everything you have. Second, to Marco, her personal assistant. Clear tomorrow. All of it. Tell no one. Third, to herself as a reminder. Do not cry. Do not break. Do not give them the satisfaction. Not yet. 14 minutes later, when the head seamstress Margot returned to the fitting room with her French accent thick with professional satisfaction, she found Alessia exactly where she had left her, standing on the platform, serene, composed, wearing her perfect bride smile. "You look like a woman without a single care in the world," Margot said, making the final adjustments. Alessia watched herself in the 7 mirrors. "I have learned," she said quietly, "that staying calm is the best revenge." Margot laughed, not understanding. "Revenge for what, Sherry?" "For being underestimated," Alessia replied. The apartment Alessia shared with Raphael occupied the top 2 floors of a converted brownstone in the West Village, exposed brick, museum-quality art, custom furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Perry Street. Alessia had designed most of it herself, back when she still believed she was building a home instead of a stage set for someone else's performance. She arrived at 7:30. Raphael's car wasn't in the garage. She changed with mechanical precision. Yoga pants, cashmere sweater, the casual intimacy of a woman who felt safe in her own home, and settled into the library with a glass of Barolo and a book she did not read a single word of. She heard his key in the lock at 9:15. "Alessia?" His voice carried through the apartment with the easy confidence of a man who owned everything he entered. "Tesoro, are you home?" "Library," she called back, arranging her face. He appeared in the doorway in his charcoal suit, dark hair silvering elegantly at the temples, eyes that could shift from warm to calculating in a single blink and back again before anyone noticed, the smile that had made her trust him. He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. "My beautiful bride," he said. "How was the fitting?" "Perfect," Alessia said. "Margot is a genius." "I have no doubt you look stunning." He poured himself a scotch and settled into the chair across from her with the ease of a man who had nothing to hide. He told her about his day, property signatures, lunch with the development team, contract reviews, every word precise and false and delivered without a single tremor. Alessia watched him over the rim of her wine glass and marveled, quietly and coldly, at how effortless it was for him. "I've been thinking," she said, setting down her glass with care.
About the business.
"About protecting everything we've built as we move forward." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "Protected how?" "Legacy planning, corporate restructuring, making sure if anything ever happened, which it won't, everything would be secure." She held his eyes. "My attorney mentioned some additional structures. Beyond the prenup. Very standard." Something shifted in Raphael's posture. Imperceptibly. Almost. "The prenup is comprehensive," he said. "Of course. But you're expanding so rapidly. The international properties, the new development pipeline. It might be worth having cleaner liability separation." She smiled the way she always smiled when she wanted him to feel unchallenged. "It's what I'd advise any client in your position." "Send the documents," he said finally. "My team will review them tomorrow." "Actually," she stood, crossed to him, and settled into his lap the way she had 1,000 times. Let him wrap his arms around her, rested her cheek against his chest. "I thought we could review them together. Over dinner tomorrow. Just us. One last quiet evening." "Of course," he said, stroking her hair. "Whatever you need, Alessia." She closed her eyes and let him hold her. 5 more minutes. She allowed herself exactly 5. Then she kissed his jaw, murmured something about a bath, and walked to the master bathroom. With the door locked and the water running, she pulled out her phone and forwarded the recording to Valentina Greco with a single message. "This is what we're working with. I want him destroyed." The response came back in under 60 seconds. "My office. 7 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything. We go to war." Alessia sat on the bathroom floor in her cashmere sweater and let herself cry. She allowed 3 minutes. She timed them. Then she washed her face, studied the steadiness of her own eyes in the mirror, and made a decision about exactly how this was going to end. "There is a morality clause," Valentina Greco said. She was 51, ruthlessly brilliant, and professionally famous for dismantling powerful men who believed their resources made them invincible. Alessia had hired her 6 months ago to review the prenuptial agreement. Valentina had recommended against signing. Alessia had overruled her. Now Valentina sat across from her at 7 in the morning in her Midtown office, and her expression said, "I told you so," without using a single one of those words. Standard language about fidelity and conduct, Valentina continued, pulling up the document. "In the event of infidelity prior to marriage, the injured party may seek remedy, including adjusted asset division and..." She stopped reading. She leaned forward. Her expression did something complicated. "Immediate vesting of any voting rights contingent on the marriage." Alessia's pulse kicked. "Explain that." "Your fiancé was very clever," Valentina said. "Too clever." Buried in the corporate structure documents attached to the prenup, there is a provision. Upon marriage, you receive minority voting rights in Connie Holdings.
Minority.
Not enough to threaten his control, just enough to make you look like a legitimate stakeholder. A decoration. Precisely. Except, Valentina's eyes moved back to the screen and sharpened. If he violates the morality clause before the marriage is finalized, those rights vest anyway. But his control provisions are voided. The room went very quiet. If his position is voided, Valentina continued, it triggers a cascade through the entire voting structure. Other board members have contingent control positions with different triggers. The whole architecture collapses. Alessia stared at the documents spread across the desk. "He wrote his own trap," she said. "He wrote a sophisticated trap designed to protect his empire," Valentina corrected. "He simply never imagined you would be the one to spring it." They spent the next 4 hours building the map. The financial records Alessia could access. The corporate documents. The prenup. The shell companies Raffaele had mentioned casually over years of dinner conversation. Always just beyond the edge of her attention. Always explained away as standard development structures. At 11:15, Valentina set down her pen. "We need more than the affair," she said. "The morality clause gives us the corporate implosion. But I want something that makes him untouchable in the worst possible way. Something that brings down the entire empire." "Fiamma," Alessia said. "She has everything. Text messages, emails, financial records for the apartment he bought her. Can you get them?" "She's terrified of what happens if this falls apart," Alessia said slowly. "If I position it correctly, protection for her and the baby, she'll turn on him." Valentina held her gaze. "Once we start moving pieces, Alessia, he will notice. He will fight back. Are you ready for that?" Alessia thought about the dress hanging at Maison Laurent, about the cathedral, about Raphael's voice saying she's been exactly what I needed, the same way a contractor describes a reliable tool. "Book the forensic accountant," she said. "I'll handle Fiamma tonight." That was the point of no return. She crossed it without breaking her stride. She just heard her entire future collapse behind a silk screen, and instead of falling apart, she pressed record. If that doesn't tell you everything about who Alessia Caruso is, stay with me. Hit that like button right now and drop your city in the comments. I need to know where in the world is watching a woman burn her old life down and build a new one from the ashes. Subscribe because this story is only getting started. Fiamma Russo lived in a renovated warehouse building in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed steel beams, a doorman who didn't blink when Alessia walked in and said she was expected. The apartment was stunning. The kind of stunning that doesn't happen on an associate's salary. The kind of stunning that happens when someone else is paying the rent through a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. Fiamma opened the door and went the color of chalk. Alessia. The word came out fractured. What are you? How did you? Can I come in? Alessia said quietly. We need to talk. For a long, suspended moment, Fiamma looked like she might slam the door. Then she stepped back. The apartment smelled of paint and expensive candles. On the kitchen counter, a prenatal vitamin bottle sat next to a half-eaten bowl of soup. 3 months, maybe 4. Alessia had known Fiamma for 2 years and had never once looked at her the way she was looking at her now, for what was actually there instead of what Alessia had wanted to see. I was in the next fitting room, Alessia said.
At Maison Laurent.
This afternoon. Fiamma sat down on the couch as if her legs had simply stopped working. I heard everything, Alessia said. Oh, God. Fiamma's voice was barely sound. Alessia sat across from her. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform rage. There was something colder than rage operating inside her now, something precise and patient. How long? She asked.
A year.
Fiamma's hands were shaking. Maybe a little more. Does he love you? The pause that followed was its own answer. He says he does. Fiamma whispered. Do you believe him? I want to. Alessia leaned forward. Let me tell you what I know. He bought you this apartment through a shell company, so there is no paper trail connecting it to him. He has been transferring money to offshore accounts to cover your expenses without leaving evidence. He spent a year sleeping with both of us while planning a wedding that was never about love. It was about legitimacy, power, and controlling the narrative. You are not his future. You are his secret. And if this threatens his position, he will sacrifice you without a second thought. He said he was going to leave you. Fiamma started. After the wedding, Alessia finished. And then nothing changes. He told you that, didn't he? Those were his exact words. Fiamma's face collapsed. He is going to keep me as his wife because I am useful, Alessia continued. He is going to keep you as his mistress because you are convenient. And your child. She watched Fiamma's hand move protectively to her stomach. Your child is going to grow up in a compartment. Hidden, ashamed, funded, but invisible. That's not. Fiamma stopped.
He wouldn't.
Fiamma. Alessia's voice was almost gentle. When did he set up this apartment? A pause. Last year. And when did my firm's biggest contracts close? When did Raffaele's development pipeline double in size? Silence. Same timeline, Alessia said. I was opening every door for him. You were keeping him comfortable, making him feel powerful, keeping him from examining what he was doing too closely. We were both being used, just in different ways. Fiamma was crying now, openly, without trying to stop it. What do you want from me? Proof, Alessia said. Text messages, emails, financial records, everything that shows what has actually been happening. If I give you that, he'll know it was me. If you don't, Alessia said, you'll spend the rest of your life waiting for him to decide you're a liability. Is that what you want for your child? A father who keeps you both hidden like an error he's trying to manage? Fiamma stared at her for a long moment, long enough that the question became its own answer. There are texts, she said finally. Hundreds. He got sloppy. He stopped worrying about evidence. Because he thinks he's already won, Alessia said. She left her card on the coffee table. Send everything to that address tonight. And Fiamma, she paused at the door. Don't tell him I was here. Don't tell him anything. Just send it and let me handle the rest. Outside, in her car on the Brooklyn Bridge with Manhattan glittering across the Blackwater, Alessia's hands shook for exactly 4 minutes. Then they stopped. The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. 14 months of messages.
Wire transfers.
Lease agreements. Receipts. Photos. Raffaele calling Fiamma beautifully uncomplicated. Raffaele telling her that being with Alessia was necessary but exhausting. Raffaele, in bed beside Fiamma in a hotel in Philadelphia, looking softer and more unguarded than Alessia had seen him in years. She forwarded everything to Valentina, then called the forensic accountant Valentina had arranged, a woman named Katerina Walsh, sharp-eyed and relentless, who'd already spent 12 hours following the money. Classic laundering architecture, Katerina said over the phone at 3 a.m. Cash businesses as entry points, restaurants, a nightclub in Tribeca, waste management contracts in New Jersey. Money moves through shell companies, surfaces clean on the other side as real estate investment. 40 million minimum over 3 years. Possibly more. Where's it coming from? Domestic organized crime revenue partially. But there's a second stream. Eastern European. Consistent with oligarch wealth extraction. He has business partners in those regions. He told me they were legitimate investors. They might be, Katerina said. They're also moving money in patterns that would interest several federal agencies very much. Alessia sat in her darkened home office, surrounded by the ghost of a future she had planned with meticulous care, and made the decision that would change everything. The following evening, she met Raffaele for dinner at Osteria Marchetti on Central Park South, the same restaurant where he had taken her on their first date 6 years ago. He was already at their table when she arrived, charcoal suit, that devastating smile. "You look breathtaking," he said, standing to kiss her cheek. She wore a navy Valentino dress she had chosen specifically because it made her look warm.
Soft.
Uncalculating. They ordered. They talked about the honeymoon he'd planned to Positano, about the suite at the Pierre for the night before the ceremony. He was entirely at ease, entirely certain, entirely wrong about who was sitting across from him. Over dessert, she slid the folder across the table. "Corporate restructuring documents," she said. "Very standard. Just formalizing your control position and protecting against future challenges." Valentina had prepared a decoy set, legitimate-looking, meaningless if signed, designed entirely to make Raffaele feel like he was reviewing something benign. He flipped through them. His expressions said manageable. His eyes said he was already somewhere else. "This clause here," Alessia said, pointing. "About voting rights and contingent vesting. Can you explain it?" "Legal language," he said dismissively. "You'll have a minority stake in the holding company. Operational control stays with me and the board. Standard structure." And this part, she pulled out a second document. Real this time. I had Valentina draft an addendum to the prenup. An infidelity clause. Something flickered behind Raffaele's eyes. Quick and cold. Gone in an instant. "That seems adversarial," he said slowly. "It's protective," Alessia said, keeping her voice light as air. "For both of us. If either of us ever strays, which of course neither of us would, the injured party has recourse. Adjusted asset division. Accelerated vesting. Very standard for high-profile marriages." Valentina insisted. Raffaele looked at the document. She watched him calculate. The risk of an affair so carefully hidden it could not possibly be discovered against the optics of a groom who refused a basic fidelity agreement 2 days before his wedding. He picked up the pen.
He signed.
He signed without reading the fine print. Just like he had signed the original prenup without examining the clauses Valentina had planted inside it. Just like he always did when he was certain the person across from him was not a threat. Alessia took the document back, slid it into her portfolio, and smiled.
"Thank you," she said.
For being so understanding. Outside the restaurant, he pulled her close and kissed her deeply. 72 hours, he murmured. "And then you're mine." "Forever," Alessia agreed. She let him put her in a car. Then she redirected the driver to Valentina's office, where Katerina Walsh had been working for 20 straight hours, and the case against Raffaele Conti was almost ready to be lit. "Your fiancé is a spectacularly arrogant criminal," Katerina said by way of greeting, turning her laptop screen to face Alessia. He barely tried to hide it. That's how confident he was. Valentina leaned in. The morality clause has been triggered by the evidence from Fiamma. His corporate control position is now legally voidable. When it voids, it sets off a cascade. The entire Conti Holdings voting structure fractures. "And the money laundering?" Alessia asked. "That," Katerina said, is where this stops being a divorce proceeding and becomes a federal matter. They worked through the night. By the time the sky over Manhattan began to lighten, they had a plan. Precise, irreversible, timed to the minute. Alessia went home, moved through the apartment like a ghost, packed a bag without waking Raffaele, and stood for one moment in the doorway of the bedroom watching him sleep. Unbothered.
Certain.
Completely wrong. Then she left. At noon, Alessia met her firm's board, her 5 most trusted people, in the conference room at Caruso Interiors. "I'm canceling the wedding," she said without preamble. They erupted. She held up one hand, and they fell silent, because that was what happened when Alessia Caruso used that particular gesture. She told them everything she could: the affair, the financial irregularities, the coming federal investigation. She watched their faces move through shock, then fury, then a kind of fierce, protective clarity. "Any project involving Connie Developments," she said, "suspended immediately. Any public association between Caruso Interiors and Connie Holdings, sever it today. I want our name completely separated from us before this becomes public." "What about you?" asked Damiano Ferretti, her head of operations. He'd known Alessia for 9 years. His voice was careful in the way of someone who understood they were watching something historic happen in real time. "I survive," Alessia said. "That's what I do." Afterwards, she sat alone in her office for 3 hours, pulling 6 years of emails and meeting notes and introductions she'd made on Raffaele's behalf, building a timeline, creating a record that would make the line between victim and participant unmistakable. At 11:30 that night, Valentina called. "The prosecutors are in," she said. "They reviewed everything. They want to move forward." "How soon?" "They'll have agents at the board meeting. Federal. If Raffaele says anything incriminating, and men like him always do when they feel cornered, they'll have grounds for immediate action." "And Fiamma?" "Immunity in exchange for cooperation. The prosecutors see her as a victim. She'll testify, if needed. She's already agreed." "And the bigger picture? The laundering?" Valentina paused. The kind of pause that precedes something that changes the scope of everything. "Katerina found communications tonight," she said carefully, suggesting that Raffaele's connection to organized crime may go beyond financial. The Connie name has associations going back decades. He tried to sever them. He just hid them instead. "How far back?" His grandfather was a capo in Palermo before he came to Brooklyn in 1971. His father maintained connections while running legitimate businesses as a front. Raffaele inherited both the empire and the debts. He spent 20 years trying to go clean, but when it mattered, when the real money was available, he chose the life. "He used me to make himself acceptable to a world that would have kept its doors closed to the Connie name," Alessia said quietly. "He used your reputation as a social passport," Valentina confirmed. "Every investor you brought to his table, every politician you introduced, every charity board he joined through your connections, all of it gave cover to what was underneath." Alessia sat very still. A woman who had spent 5 years believing in someone's potential, understanding for the first time how completely that belief had been used against her.
"Tomorrow," she said.
"We end it tomorrow. If you're still here, you already understand that this isn't just a story about a cheating fiancé. It's about what happens when a woman discovers the man she loved was using her entire life as a weapon and decides to pick it up and use it back. Alessia isn't a victim. She was never going to be a victim. She's something far more dangerous, a woman who is smarter than the man who underestimated her. Subscribe right now, because in 12 minutes, Raffaele Conti is going to walk into a room he thinks he owns and find out the most terrifying thing that can happen to a powerful man is a woman who finally stops protecting him. Drop your city in the comments. I need to know where in the world is watching him fall. The Connie Holdings office occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. Alessia had been here dozens of times, for celebrations, for meetings, for the carefully staged events where Raffaele showed off his accomplished, beautiful fiancé to investors who needed to believe he had crossed over into legitimacy. She had always felt proud walking through those doors. At 8:30 a.m., stepping out of a black car with Valentina at her side in her crimson Armani suit, she felt nothing except the cold, exquisite clarity of someone who has already decided how this ends. "Ready?" Valentina asked. "Let's finish it," Alessia said. The receptionist looked up in surprise. "Ms. Caruso, I didn't know you'd be attending this morning." "Last-minute addition," Alessia said pleasantly. "Is everyone here?" "Most of them. Mr. Conti is in his office." "Perfect. We'll wait in the conference room." The conference room was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that seated 30, technology built into every wall. Alessia had consulted on the design of this space 2 years ago. She knew exactly where every camera was. She knew exactly which seat at the head of the table had the clearest sight line to the door. She took it. Board members filed in. Investors. Business partners. Men in expensive suits who had trusted Raffaele with significant money, partly because Alessia Caruso had told them, with the full weight of her reputation, that he was worth trusting. At 8:50, 2 men in dark suits entered quietly and took seats at the back. They did not introduce themselves. Alessia knew who they were. At 8:55, Raffaele walked in. Navy suit, white shirt, the absolute, unshakable confidence of a man who believes he controls every variable in every room he enters. When he saw Alessia standing at the head of his conference table in crimson, something flickered across his face. Surprise, then irritation, then the careful neutrality of a man who has learned not to show what he doesn't understand. "Alessia." His voice was pleasant and edged. "What are you doing here?" "I called the meeting," she said. The pleasant surface of his expression developed a hairline fracture. "You called. Why don't you sit down?" She gestured to the chair at the opposite end of the table. "We have quite a lot to cover." For a moment, one long, suspended moment, she thought he might refuse. Take control of the room the way he always did. But he was surrounded by his board, his investors, his partners, all watching, all waiting. He could not make a scene without making a scene. He sat. "This better be important," he said, voice easy, eyes cold. "We have a wedding to prepare for." "About that," Alessia said. She picked up a remote and activated the screen behind her. The first message appeared on the screen. Raffaele's name. Fiamma's name. "I cannot stop thinking about last night. You are extraordinary." The room went silent the way rooms go silent when the air is suddenly pulled out of them. Raffaele's face drained of color. "Alessia," his voice came out tight. "What the hell is this?" "Please don't interrupt," she said. "We have a great deal to cover." She moved through the messages.
Dozens of them.
The conversation from the salon, captured on her phone, played through the room's speakers in Raffaele's own voice. "She's been exactly what I needed, the perfect polished surface to hide what's underneath," while every person in that room watched the man they had trusted listen to himself confess. "This is a private matter," Raffaele said, standing. His control was fraying visibly now, edges coming loose. "This is not an appropriate forum." "Sit down, Mr. Conti," Valentina said, her voice completely flat. "Or we will have security assist you." "Security? This is my company." "That," Valentina said, "is currently debatable, which is precisely why we are here." Slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who understands that every movement is being watched, Raffaele sat back down. "Thank you," Alessia said. She moved to the financial evidence. Katerina Walsh stepped forward and walked the room through $40 million moving through shell companies, through restaurants and nightclubs and waste management businesses, emerging clean on the other side as legitimate real estate. "These structures," Katerina said, her voice the calm of someone who has done this many times, "are consistent with patterns we see in organized crime revenue laundering." Additionally, several of the international accounts appear connected to wealth extraction from Eastern European sources, money that needed to be cleaned and legitimized in the U.S. market. One of the investors, a venture capitalist named Gregorio Palmieri, who had put $30 million into Raffaele's last development, stood up slowly. "You are telling me my investment is tied to money laundering." "We are telling you," Valentina said, "that Conti Holdings has been operating as a criminal enterprise while using the reputations and investments of legitimate parties to maintain its facade of respectability." The room erupted. Raffaele tried to talk over it. Alessia let it run for exactly 30 seconds. Then she picked up the small silver gavel she had placed on the table before he arrived and struck it once. Silence.
There is more, she said.
She explained the prenuptial agreement, the corporate documents he had signed at dinner without reading them, the morality clause now triggered, the cascading void in the Connie Holdings control structure. She watched the understanding arrive on his face. She watched the moment he realized what she had done, what he had helped her do, by signing his name to documents without reading them because he had been absolutely certain she was incapable of outmaneuvering him.
You tricked me, he said.
Quiet. Dangerous. I gave you documents to review, Alessia said. You signed them without reading the fine print. That is not trickery. That is carelessness. My lawyers will. Mr. Conti. The voice came from the back of the room. The taller of the two men in dark suits stood, pulling credentials. Special Agent Lorenzo Vitali, FBI Financial Crimes Division. This is Special Agent Diana Kwan. We've been monitoring this meeting with considerable interest. Raphael looked at Alessia, at Valentina, at the room full of people he had used and managed and kept carefully compartmentalized, all watching him at once. You will regret this, he said to her.
Low.
Just for her. You have no idea what you have done. I know exactly what I've done, Alessia replied. I stopped you from doing to someone else what you tried to do to me. I made you. You borrowed me, she interrupted. You wore my reputation like a borrowed coat. And today I am taking it back. Agent Vitali stepped forward. Mr. Conti, we're going to need you to come with us. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. But we strongly encourage your cooperation. Raphael looked at Alessia one last time. Something moved through his expression that she couldn't entirely name. Rage, yes, but underneath it something older and colder that might, in another life, have been grief. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Alessia said. It is. She watched the federal agents escort him out. She watched his board members immediately convene in urgent, whispered clusters. She watched his investors begin the silent calculation of extraction. How quickly could they distance themselves? What could be salvaged? Who else might be implicated? Gregorio Palmieri approached her as the room emptied. You warned no one, he said. It was not quite an accusation. I discovered the truth 4 days ago, Alessia replied. Everything I did after that happened as fast as it could. He studied her for a long moment. What do you need from me? When this becomes public, and it will, today, I need people who know the truth to speak clearly. That Raphael manipulated everyone. That his crimes were his own. That I was a victim, not a participant. Consider it done, he said, and walked out. Alessia stood alone in the conference room with Valentina and Katerina and felt the adrenaline that had been holding her vertical for 4 days begin, slowly, like water finding the edges of a container, to drain. You did it, Valentina said. We did it, Alessia corrected. And then, because she had earned it, I need to call 500 people and cancel a wedding. The calls took 3 hours. Her mother cried. Her father went very quiet in the way that meant he was deciding who deserved his fury most. The wedding planner was devastated. The florist was sympathetic and firm about the cancellation fees. By the time Alessia finished the last call, it was 11:30. 90 minutes until the ceremony that would never happen. She looked at the empty conference room, at the screens that had displayed the evidence of her fiancé's betrayal, at the flowers still on the lobby reception desk downstairs, ordered for a celebration that no longer existed. The Pierre, she said to Valentina. The reception. 500 guests were going to show up expecting something. Valentina raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? They were invited to witness my happy ending, Alessia said slowly. What if instead they witnessed me refusing to be destroyed by someone who tried to write my story for me? A press conference. On my terms. Before his lawyers start spinning this. Before a single tabloid gets to tell the story of the poor bride who didn't see it coming. That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard, Valentina said, or the most reckless. I've learned, Alessia said, that they're often the same thing. The ballroom had been transformed. Round tables gone. Rows of chairs facing a stage and a podium. The Ecuadorian roses and French peonies still framed the walls, expensive evidence of a life that no longer existed in its planned form. Alessia watched from a private room as 500 confused, curious, carefully dressed people filed in and took their seats. Her parents found her at 6:45. Her mother's eyes were red. Her father looked like he was being very deliberate about his breathing. "You don't have to do this," her mother said. "You don't owe these people anything." "If I don't speak first," Alessia said, "someone else tells my story for me, and I have worked too hard for too long to let that happen." At 7 p.m. exactly, she walked onto the stage. The room went absolutely still. She was still in the crimson Armani suit, her hair perfect, her posture perfect, her eyes carrying something that was not grief and not triumph, but existed in the territory between them where survival lives. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice amplified and clear. "I know this is not the event you were expecting." She told them the truth. All of it. The affair, the pregnancy, the financial crimes. The 5 years she had spent building a future on a foundation someone else had deliberately made false. She told them she had helped expose it. She told them she had cooperated with federal authorities from the moment she understood the scope of what Raffaele had done. She told them she had not known, she had not participated, and she would not spend a single moment of the rest of her life pretending to be ashamed of having trusted someone who was expert at being trusted. "I want to be very clear about something," she said, and the room was so quiet she could hear the ventilation system. "I was deceived. I was manipulated. I was used by a man who saw my reputation as a resource to be extracted. For 5 years, I believed I was building a future with someone I loved. What I was actually doing was providing sophisticated cover for someone who was never capable of the love he was performing."
She paused.
"I'm standing here tonight because I refuse to disappear. Because the women who disappear after something like this, who go quiet and let powerful men control the narrative of their own victimization, end up defined by what was done to them. I will not be defined by what Raffaele Conti did. I will be defined by what I did next." 3 seconds of silence. Then her mother started clapping. Then her father. Then Damiano and the Caruso Interiors team. Then, in a wave that moved from the front of the room to the back like something inevitable, 500 people stood up. Alessia stood at the podium and let the sound wash over her. It was not the sound of a wedding, but it was something she had earned with her own hands, her own courage, her own refusal to be erased. It was enough. More than enough. The prosecutors updated her 2 days later. Raffaele's lawyers were already negotiating. He was offering cooperation, names, records, testimony against former associates, in exchange for reduced charges. 8 years, possibly, Valentina said, instead of 20. And the people he names? 7 indictments projected. Coordinated raids across 3 states. This goes beyond Raffaele, Alessia. He's connected to infrastructure that has been operating for decades. He used me to build the cover that protected all of it, Alessia said. He used you, Valentina agreed. And now the information he has, information he could only have because he was inside that world, is going to dismantle it. There is a terrible poetry in that, Alessia said. There was a meeting. Federal building, 8th floor, conference room. Raffaele arrived in restraints and an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 attorneys whose suits cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the clothes. He saw Alessia across the table and something moved through his face. She refused to name it. I want to explain, he said. Then explain, she said. He told her about the Conti name. About obligations inherited like furniture. You didn't choose them. They were simply there when you arrived, and dismantling them was more complicated than anyone outside them could understand. He told her that he had genuinely tried in the early years to go legitimate, that the pressure from his father's former associates had been specific and non-negotiable, that he had made the choice to stay connected because the alternative was a kind of exposure he hadn't been willing to risk. You could have told me, Alessia said. If I had told you, Raffaele said quietly, you would have left. Yes, she said. I would have. And I needed you not to leave. Not because I didn't feel something real, I did. But because what I felt was insufficient motivation for me to risk everything I had built. So I kept you. I kept you happy and certain and unaware because it was easier than being honest and losing the only legitimate thing in my life. He looked at her directly. You are the only legitimate thing in my life, Alessia. The room was very quiet. That's not love, she said finally. That's utility dressed up to look like devotion. And I think part of you knew the difference the entire time. Raffaele said nothing, which was, in its way, an answer. Do something useful, Alessia said, standing. Give them everything. Not for the plea deal, although take the plea deal. But because it is the one genuinely decent thing you can do before this is over. She walked to the door. Goodbye, Raffaele, she said. I hope I never see you again. She left without looking back. In the hallway outside, she leaned against the wall for 30 seconds and breathed. Then she straightened her jacket and walked toward the elevator. Okay, Valentina asked. I will be, Alessia said. That's different from okay, but it's enough for right now. Over the following weeks, the case against Raffaele Conti and 7 of his associates dominated every major outlet.
The raids.
The asset seizures. The coordinated collapse of a criminal architecture that had been operating quietly behind legitimate facades for 30 years. Fiamma disappeared into a new life somewhere far from New York with her daughter, a girl she named Speranza.
Hope.
Conti Holdings declared bankruptcy. Its legitimate assets were sold to settle creditors. Its illegitimate operations simply dissolved, their money swallowed into federal seizure accounts. Caruso Interiors not only survived, it grew. Clients who had followed the story, who had watched Alessia stand in a ballroom and refused to be erased, called to offer their business specifically because of her integrity. A woman who had been betrayed at the highest level and responded by dismantling the betrayal instead of hiding from it was, it turned out, exactly the kind of person people wanted designing spaces they planned to live their lives in. She threw herself into work. She redesigned her office. She hired a new senior associate, a 40-year-old woman named Serena Albany, meticulous and unintimidatable, who had no interest whatsoever in drama. And slowly, in the way that healing actually happens, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of ordinary days where the grief is slightly less present than yesterday, she began to recover. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Alessia received a call from the federal prosecutors about a victims fund being established with recovered money from the Conti seizure. And an offer. We're proposing a foundation, the prosecutor said, using the recovered assets to help people recover from similar situations. Financial fraud victims. Women escaping controlling relationships. The infrastructure to help people rebuild after being manipulated and used. We'd like you on the board. Alessia was quiet for a long moment. What would you call it? We thought you might want to name it. She looked out her office window at Manhattan, at the city that had watched her walk into a bridal salon and walk out someone entirely different. The Speranza Foundation, she said. Hope. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, a letter arrived at Caruso Interiors, forwarded through 3 layers of legal review. The return address was a federal correctional facility upstate. Raffaele. Alessia held it for a long time before opening it. Alessia, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you burned it. But if you are reading it, I want you to know a few things. The information I provided has resulted in indictments against people who have been operating criminal enterprises since before either of us was born. I am told that communities in 3 cities are safer because of the testimony I gave. I would like to pretend this balances the ledger. I know it doesn't. I saw the announcement about the Speranza Foundation. I saw the work it is doing, helping people rebuild after exactly the kind of manipulation I specialized in. You took the worst thing I ever did and made it into something that helps people. That is exactly who you have always been. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for anything. I am asking only that you know you were right about everything. I did not love you the way you deserved. I used you. I betrayed you. I caused harm that cannot be undone. But you survived me. And the woman you became on the other side of surviving me is extraordinary. I hope you find what I was never capable of giving you. Raffaele. Alessia read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, not to treasure, not to revisit, simply to acknowledge and release, and went back to work. 5 years after the wedding that never happened, Alessia Caruso stood in front of a different mirror, wearing a different dress. This one was simpler. Silk crepe and champagne, clean lines, no cathedral train. A dress chosen not because it would impress 500 guests, but because when she put it on, she felt like herself. Her mother was there, crying in the good way. Valentina was maid of honor, wearing dark green and an expression of fierce, quiet pride. The ceremony was held in the garden of a converted farmhouse in the Hudson Valley, 50 guests, string lights, an early September evening where the air still carried the last of summer. Her parents in the front row, the Caruso Interiors team, friends who had been there through the worst of it and stayed. And at the end of the aisle, waiting with his daughter beside him, a girl of 13 now, all elbows and opinions, was Giacomo Ferrara. He was a corporate attorney who had been introduced to Alessia at a college friend's wedding 3 years ago. He had asked for her number with the specific, unhurried confidence of a man who is interested and has decided to be honest about it. Their first date had been 3 hours at a small wine bar in the West Village, talking about work and books and the particular loneliness of building something meaningful while still figuring out who you're building it with. He had never hidden anything. He had told her about his divorce on the second date, not because it was the right tactical move, but because he thought she should know who she was spending time with. He had been patient when she pulled back, understanding when she needed time, careful in the way of someone who had also been hurt, and understood that trust is not a thing you demand, but a thing you build, slowly, with consistent honesty. When they exchanged vows, they were words they had written together, specific and real, and a little imperfect in places, which was how they both understood real love to work. When the officiant pronounced them married and Giacomo took her face in his hands and kissed her in front of everyone who loved them, Alessia felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not the desperate, managed happiness she had performed with Raffaele, always slightly afraid that if she relaxed her grip it would dissolve. Something steadier, something built on the only foundation that actually holds anything, the truth of who two people actually are, offered to each other without strategy. At the reception, her father gave a toast. 5 years ago, he said, his voice rough around the edges, my daughter was supposed to marry someone else. When that wedding didn't happen, I thought she had been robbed of her future. I was wrong. He looked at Alessia. She wasn't robbed of anything. She was spared from a life built on someone else's deception. And what she chose to do with that, the foundation, the work, the way she rebuilt herself without becoming someone smaller, that is the bravest thing I have ever watched anyone do. He raised his glass to Alessia, who taught every person in this room that the strongest thing you can do is survive someone who tried to break you, and then go on to build something they never could have imagined. Later, dancing with Giacomo under the string lights while the Hudson Valley night settled cool and quiet around them, Alessia thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago. Standing on a fitting platform in $300,000 of ivory silk, believing so completely in a future that was never real. She was grateful to that woman for surviving, for pressing record, for walking into a boardroom in a crimson suit and refusing to be anyone's beautiful, meticulous control freak ever again. You're somewhere else, Giacomo said, watching her face.
5 years ago, she said.
Is it okay? Being here instead. She looked at him, at this man who had never once asked her to be simpler than she was, who had never once treated her intelligence as something to be managed rather than matched. Yes, she said, without hesitation or performance. This is everything okay is supposed to feel like. He pulled her closer, and they danced until the stars came out over the Hudson Valley, and Alessia Caruso, who had survived the most beautiful lie ever told to her and chosen, with full knowledge of the cost, to trust again, finally arrived at the life she had always deserved. Not the one that had been planned, the one she had built herself, from the wreckage of someone else's ambition, with her own hands and her own fury and her own stubborn, indestructible belief that love, real love, honest love, love that does not require you to perform or protect or manage, is still worth the risk of trying. If this story found you at exactly the right moment, if you have ever loved someone who is using your trust as a resource, or if you have ever had to decide whether surviving someone changes who you are, share this video with the person who needs to hear it. Because the most dangerous thing Raffaele Conti ever did was assume that the woman he underestimated didn't have the capacity to become his consequence. Subscribe, because these are the stories worth telling, about women who press record instead of crying, who walk into boardrooms in crimson when everyone expects them to disappear, who build foundations out of what was meant to destroy them. Drop your city in the comments, and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Because in this world, the real world, the one we all actually live in, nothing broken stays broken forever. Unless you let it.